Hey everyone, LeNora here. Have you heard about Childfree Morning Chat? It's live audio conversations that happen every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the Clubhouse app. It's open to all genders. We have many different countries represented, and it's a safe space where Childfree people can gather together and share their experiences, ask questions, have some laughs, and of course, make friends. It's free to join. You can join as a speaker, or you can listen in the audience while you're at work. Just download the app on your phone, search Childfree Club, and request to join, and tell them LeNora sent you. Hi.
Hola.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I am the creator of the Uprising Spark, and I am a child-free coach. I help women like myself who have decided not to have children consciously to overcome feelings of guilt, anger, shame, and everything that can be attached to our choice. I'm also the host of the Honest Upper podcast, and I have a bit of a cold today, so I apologize in advance.
Hi, my name is LeNora. I am a child-free lifestyle advocate, speaker, and moderator, most notably for the 2021 Virtual Child-Free Conference, which you can now watch on YouTube. I also host a show called Childfree Morning Chat on the Clubhouse app, part of Childfree Club, and you can find me over on Instagram at Childfree Blog.
Oh, hi, I'm Kristen Tetzi. I'm a writer who has done my best to try to incorporate the child-free perspective in the things I write, mostly in the form of characters who feel the pressure to have children they don't want. Most recently in my novel, The Age of the Child, in which a repeal of Roe versus Wade has unanticipated consequences that take a surprising turn from one generation to the next. We are the three founding non-mothers of Childfree Girls, and today we're really excited to introduce you to someone you probably already know if you're anywhere in the childless or child-free community. She is Jody Day, and she's the founder of Gateway Women, which is the global friendship and support network for childless women that she founded in London in 2011. It's now based in Ireland, or headquartered in Ireland. She's also the author of the book, Living the Life Unexpected, How to Find Hope, Meaning, and a Fulfilling Future Without Children. She's a TEDx speaker, a social entrepreneur, and a founding and former board member at Aging Well Without Children. Hello, Jody.
Hello, well, thank you for that introduction. I don't recognize that person. She's obviously very busy.
She must be.
Yeah.
One of the things I really want to I listened to your TED talk, your TEDx talk, and you talked about the moment when you realized that children weren't going to be part of your future. And I'll probably ask you to talk about that a little bit more later, but what I really want to know is what I want to know right now is how that turned into Gateway Women and how even the words Gateway Women came to you.
Thank you. Well, like so many things, it arose sort of out of personal need. If we go back to 2011 and we go back a few years before that, when I, first realized that childlessness was my permanent destiny rather than a sort of inconvenient stopping point on the way to motherhood, I looked around for support. I looked around for guidance, inspiration. I found nothing. I was born in the 1960s in the UK. I was one in 4 women my age were turning, midlife without children, but I didn't know any of them, either in my family, my social circle, my acquaintances, my colleagues, in the public eye, anywhere. I couldn't see anyone like me. The only person I knew who was maybe a bit like me, but also not like me, was Oprah. I knew a couple of child-free by choice women, and I knew women who'd struggled with fertility and had treatment and it worked. I knew so many different shades of it, but I didn't know anyone who had wanted to be a mum and had spent many years of her adult life hoping, trying, dreaming, planning to become one, and was facing the rest of her life without them. And I was trying to talk to people about this. I was trying to talk to friends, to therapists, to all kinds of people, even to Dr. Google about this. And really all I got back was what I call in my TED Talk bingos. And I have to say, I got the word bingos, first of all, from the child-free community. That was where I first heard that word. you're still young, don't give up yet. Children aren't all they're cracked up to be here. Why don't you have one of mine? If you really wanted them, you would have tried harder. Why didn't you just adopt? Oh, it's so great. You get to sleep in and travel. It's a kind of, it's a list. They are kind of remarkably consistent across cultures. And there are some that the child-free community also have their own sort of special hits in that selection as well. And I realized that nobody would let me talk about it. People would try to fix me. But what they wouldn't do is listen to the fact that I wasn't talking about how can I have a baby. I was talking about the fact that's not happening for me. I'm facing a future without children. I don't really know how to even think about that or talk about it or cope with it. But nobody would let me have that conversation. I later realized that's because what I was talking about was grief and no one wants to go there. So we kind of forced forward through a couple of years of this. And I have to say, the only writings and reflections on a life without children I came across were those from child-free women. And we can talk a bit more about that later, because that's been an interesting journey for me, my understanding and relationship to the child-free choice. So, but I still couldn't find anything like me at all. And in the end, being a writer, I'd been writing a personal blog for a few years at that point. Probably had about 9 readers, films I'd seen. This was kind of the early days of they were called web blogs at that point. It was a long time ago. And I thought I'd start this new blog called Gateway Women about my experience of childlessness. I got my first piece of PR the day after the first blog was published. I had women from all over the world leaving comments, which could really be distilled down to me too. I never thought anyone had these exact words in their head. I had no idea there were other women like me. I thought I was the only one. And that was really the beginning of what has become the global friendship and advocacy network that is Gateway Women more than a decade later. And the word Gateway Women came to me. I was doing a sort of a workshop for entrepreneurs around creating a heart-centered business. And I was really working through a lot of fear. My previous career had come to an end. I was dealing with very low confidence, having come out of my sort of childless journey and, being single and childless, and also having really just scraped out of a very, very painful relationship ending with a narcissist, which had left me hollowed out emotionally, financially, spiritually, just completely on the floor after narcissistic abuse, which unfortunately is something either some of you or your listeners will relate to. And I was thinking, okay, this project I'm going to do, what am I going to call it? Because it was just a little project, a little blog, nothing, I had no major plans for it. And in my previous career, sort of marketing, PR, design, lots of things, I used to love naming things. People often used to ask me to name products or stuff for them. And I didn't even need to do that. I just went, Gateway. Oh, Project Gateway. I went, no, Gateway Women. And then I reflected on it later. Actually, I think it was the first time a journalist asked me, why Gateway Women? And I thought back to the fact that all through my life, whenever I've been traveling, remember that? And I would end up taking the same photograph all the time, which was, I would be in a darkened temple. I've done a lot of traveling in Asia. A ruined dark temple on a bright day, and I would take pictures of the kind of windows looking out into bright light. And I'd loved them when I was little, when I would visit sort of old English castles, and I knew that from my psychotherapy training, this is also a metaphor for birth. It's a very kind of archetypal image of the birth canal and the light beyond the birth canal. But really what it is a gateway is a threshold. And a threshold can be seen in 2 ways, well, probably more than 2. But it can either be seen as like a gate, something that is in between you and where you want to go, something that keeps you out of something. Or it can be seen as something which opens and marks the transition from one place to another. And Gateway Women is for women who've really come up against that gate, the gate being motherhood. But my work is about helping them step through that gate, through that threshold, into a different version of their life. And I have always been fascinated by thresholds. when I worked as a psychotherapist with young people, I loved working with adolescents. I'm fascinated by becoming or not becoming a mother, the menopause, aging, death. That's where the juicy stuff happens, when we are in these liminal states of transformation, moving between one place and another in our life. And it's a lot of great art happens there, a lot of great transformation happens there. And it just seems to be, those are the places. The juicy places, often the taboo places, where the rubber meets the road. That's where you'll find me.
I have kind of a double question. There's a lot of pressure on women to be mothers. So there is, I think, sometimes an overlap or a braiding between child-free and childless when they look at their life in the future. There are a lot of people, I think, who don't want children, but who are afraid of not wanting children because it's been so hammered into them that you can only be happy as a woman with children. Your life won't have purpose without children. So they're really stuck in this place where, but I don't want that. But what if it means that later I won't be happy? So they have this fear of lack of fulfillment in a different way, but it's still a fear of lack of fulfillment that I think women who want children, but for whatever reason won't be having them feel. And I wonder if there's, what advice do you have, or what do you say to people? Because I think the advice would probably apply to both, who are afraid of that, of like, without children, my life is just destined to be empty.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the big headline message of pronatalism, that is pushed at us right from the get-go in our lives, and its sort of shadow side, that women who don't want children are in some way deviant, which is borne out through every fairy tale. And also, I have to say, childless women as well. Every storyline in every film. I mean, if I'm watching something I haven't seen before and there's a slightly iffy female character in it, I'll go, that's going to be the one without children. And I have 100% success rate. Because, even sex education, which is like, so woke it hurts the script writers for that. I don't know if you've seen that in the US, but it's about a sex education teacher in a high school, played by Gillian Anderson. If you haven't seen it, highly recommended. And in series 3, there is I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there is a difficult female character. And I thought, let's just see where this goes. And we all know where that goes. So even the wokest writers still fell prey to this stereotype that a woman without children is in some way suspect. Whether she's chosen that or whether she hasn't, there's something a bit off about her. It is a very hard stereotype to push back against because so much of it is unconscious. I think for me, when I learned about the word pronatalism, it was like it was like taking the red pill in the Matrix. I could not unsee it anymore. It was everywhere. Laura Carroll's book, The Baby Matrix, was huge, which I read in 2012 when it came out, was hugely influential for me in helping kind of unmask pronatalism in society. It made me actually incredibly sad and angry because I realized that a lot of my thinking around wanting or not wanting, trying, not having children, had been unconsciously influenced by the ideology of pronatalism. And I felt that it was something I wished I had known about as a young woman, because I thought I was making independent choices, but actually I was following a societal script. And I was angry because I thought, how many years of my life, how many years could have been different had I known that a lot of the internalized shame and unworthiness that I felt, as well as the grief that I was feeling over not having kids, how much of that was shaped by pronatalism. So some of the things that we have to do to create a life of meaning without children is, first of all, we have to unhook from the narrative, from where that comes. We have to chase out pronatalism. We have to see it for what it is, and we have to learn to think for ourselves. So there is some very serious unbrainwashing we have to do before we can even consider that maybe a life of meaning without children is indeed possible, that it isn't a pipe dream. And we need to find others. We need to find others who've done it. We need role models and mentors and elders and literature, Kristen. You know, we need to see ourselves in the world as whole and complete women, whether we chose to be mums or whether we didn't, because what we see at the moment are women who are problematic, not women who are celebrated.
I feel like part of the battle is people feel like they have to convince, you know, non-childfree people or people who really buy into pronatalism. Like I'm taking a marketing course right now, and something that was said is that you don't look for the people you have to convince otherwise. And what you just said, I was equating that, and I was thinking, like, because at the beginning of my blogging journey, for, you know, from the child free by choice perspective, I fell into that trap for a bit of feeling like I had to convince the people in my life who questioned my decision or did not want to hear pronatalism. Because if you think about the unbrainwashing, you know, if I, for example, taking this conversation to my best friend from high school, who's from Russia, who she wanted to be a mother. She said she's always wanted to be a mother. Yeah. In my mind, I'm always going, really? Was that your choice, or was that because what you were taught? I have not yet been able to have that conversation of what pronatalism is. And this is, you know, what do you think of, do you feel that battle to have to convince, or is it, I mean, the logical answer is to find the other people who are open-minded to having that conversation, whether they're child-free, childless, or parents. But do you feel that battle of having to convince people that pronatalism even exists, first of all, before it even they can even think about it? Because that's like the basic, right? Is letting them know that it exists. And convincing, sometimes we fall into that trap of having to convince people. Or feeling
I mean, and you know, not every moment is a teaching moment. I mean, right. I cut myself some slack these days. You know, sometimes it's just like, no, I'm kind of taking a day off from educating the world. And so I think ideology is a really difficult one to talk about, because, you know, a lot of people have a kind of anti-intellectual bias, or they think you're trying to sort of, you know, go all sort of weird on them. There is a moment to talk about it. And when people say, oh, I'm not interested in ideology or something like that, and I say, well, that's like, you know, if you talk to a fish, this is a talking fish, of course, and ask it, how's the water? The fish will say, what's water? I said, it doesn't really matter whether you're interested in ideology or not. It doesn't really matter whether you believe in pronatalism or not. It's there. It's actually conditioning all of our beliefs, all of us. And, you know, sometimes people, it's going to be a lean in moment, and some people it's not. And I guess after 10 years, I've got better at judging my own energy about how, you know, whether I want to do that. And I quote it in my book, Rainbow Rowell's, you know, brilliant comment, you know, don't bother explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You know, some people have such a stake in holding on to their beliefs that, you know, you kind of pick your battles. I certainly find that being around and speaking with other childless and child-free people is very powerful. I find being a role model, a kind of a countercultural role model, so that I'm like, well, you seem okay, you know, or, oh, you're not as, you know, basically people are thinking, oh, you're not actually as weird as I thought you were going to be, you know. I think each of us can be role models in our lives without necessarily having to be vocal advocates. And I think depending on our personality and our platform, that's going to suit some people, and it's not going to suit others. And I think we all have a place to play in that. And I think so do what I think of as parent allies, you know, parent allies against pronatalism. Something that's been really interesting this year, 2021, is I think I've been invited onto 3 parenting podcasts by quite big American parent hosts who have wanted me on the show to really talk about how to understand their childless and child-free friends better, how to have those conversations, how to understand what happens in what I call the hashtag friendship apocalypse of childlessness, which can be different for child-free people, but can still also be very challenging when you're, you know, most of your circle becomes a parent and you don't. And that's what I found really, really encouraging, that they are they are starting to seek us out and say, how can we support you in building bridges? Because I think one of the shocking things about pronatalism is the way it divides and rules. It's no accident. It puts a wedge between the childless and child-free community, and also between us and the parented community. And when talking about the female part of that, we have so much more in common than we don't. But it's a great way to keep women separate from each other. And I really mind about that, to use my polite British terms.
So going back to when you, in your TED Talk, you described the moment when you realized children weren't going to be part of your future. It was a rainy day. You were watching the rain fall. You had just ended that relationship you talked about earlier, and it just kind of hit you.
Yeah.
Then in a later interview, I think it was with, I'm very sorry for the crinkle of paper. Oh, I don't remember where it was. There was a, you were talking about having reached a point of either happiness, peace, or acceptance with your life without children, that it's almost as if, like, it's at the level that it's almost as if you had chosen this yourself.
Yes.
And I just wondered if there was a moment when that hit you, when all that grief you had been feeling and all the stuff you had been working through for years and talking about and trying to help others with, if there was a morning you woke up or a moment you looked out the window and thought, I'm actually fine now.
No, but it would be great in the movie if I did. I think that was definitely a more gradual awakening. And I'll be honest, I felt a bit guilty about being okay, because I thought, there was still a lot of conditioning going on. I thought, well, if I've kind of got through this and I feel really great about things again, maybe I didn't really want kids, because it was still, the pronatalist message was, you'll never get over this. You will never be okay. You will be destroyed for the rest of your life that you were not able to have kids. Nothing else is ever going to match this experience that you haven't had. And so when I started to actually feel at peace, a bit excited about my future again, I was coming out of the grieving process, starting to kind of almost look up again and go, oh, well, okay, what might I do with this unexpected life? And it was a long time before I would admit it to other childless people, because it felt quite a shocking thing to say. I had to get used to sort of saying it out loud. And, what I say now is that I think I feel as at peace with my life as if I had chosen my childlessness. However, I'll never know, because I can't actually live both of those lives. But I no longer think that the life of Jody, who would have been a mother, would have been the better choice. I see now that it was a valid choice, and it would have been a messy, imperfect human experience where Jody was a mum. And instead, I've got this one, which is a messy, imperfect human experience where Jody isn't a mum. They are of equal value. I do no longer see my life as some kind of booby prize. I don't know if you have that expression in America. It's like the wooden spoon instead of the Oscar, but hey, nice try. And it's like, no, my life as a woman is equally of value without children. It's just different, but it's no longer also of less value than the other life I'd wanted. It's not like it's just I look at a mum and think I have equal value. I look at that other version of me and I think, yeah, this life is equally of value. And that is something we are not hearing. And that is something I bang on about, because we were born childless and worthy. Becoming or not becoming a mother does not take away that essential humanity, that essential worthiness. That is the lie that pronatalism feeds us. And I know mothers who get a great deal of meaning and purpose and pleasure out of having children. I've also met those that regret it and find it really tough. And I think what happens for mums is that they get this experience glorified, this theoretical experience of motherhood glorified. But actually, when they get to it, they don't get nearly enough support. You know, they are really given such a hard job with not enough support. There's a lot of kind of social talk support. You know, there's a lot of, you know, as a mother, this. There is a lot of kind of societal support. But actually, when the rubber meets the road, childcare, help, benefits, services, things that actually would make being a mum, you know, less stressful for modern women who are now all working as well. I mean, working class women, by their name, have always worked and had kids at the same time. Middle class women is still pretty new, but they don't have the extended family networks and local communities that that used to be around to help them. I mean, being a mother right now and also working is really tough. You know, I have a great deal of empathy for them. I wish a bit more of it came back our way, but you know, hey, room for improvement.
Do you find that there are a lot of, in the community that you're in and in the messages you receive from women, would it be possible to distill it into percentages? How many women desperately didn't have that theoretical or maybe even abstract idea of want to be a mom? Because I think a lot of girls think, I want to have a baby or I want to be a mommy, but they don't, it's not the same as wanting to be a parent. You know, they don't think about the lifelong commitment and drudgery and struggle and everything that goes along with the reward, but still the reality of it. And then you have the people who do want all that. They do want everything involved in it. They're very passionate about it. They desperately want to be what they understand as well as they possibly can is parenthood. Do you come across more of the first kind who are having to let go of this idea of what they thought they were supposed to be and thought they were supposed to want and don't know how to shift that, you know, or undo that brainwashing you talked about? Versus those who just more than anything really wanted to be a parent forever and ever and are struggling to overcome not being able to have that?
I think for those who formed an idea very, very young, that, you know, and sort of had a big family in their minds and had the names of their children's picked out, you know, there are some women who do seem to be really, really maternal from a very young age. I think for many of them, you know, go on to fertility treatments. Some of them don't. Many of them don't find a partner. All of the reasons why one might end up childless, you know, when you didn't choose. I think the struggle for them can be very challenging. I think if there is some ambivalence within you, that means that at some point there is a part of you that considered the alternative. In a way, the seeds of your ambivalence can actually often be the kind of the seeds of your healing from your childlessness. Ambivalence is very rarely discussed. It's extremely common. I would imagine it's fairly common also amongst child-free people. I mean, child-free people don't just sort of wake up and go, oh, I'm not having kids, and, you know, right, what are we having for breakfast? You know, it is a complicated, thoughtful, compassionate, deep inquiry, and one that I understand one makes many, many times. You know, it's not a kind of binary on-off switch. It's, you know, society will keep questioning you. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And perhaps for many, many child-free people will want to be absolutely sure that they've made the right choice. So there's that ambivalence, that kind of holding two realities, you know, juggling them. I was like that when I was younger. My transition was I grew up in a very unhappy family with a mum who had me as a teenager, unplanned, and was then forced into a very unhappy, abusive marriage to give me a stable home, you know. So I grew up around someone who was a reluctant, unprepared, and she was a traumatized kid herself. She was not in any way set up to be a parent. And so growing up in that, I sort of equated family with not this great thing that I wanted. So I was pretty sure that I didn't want children. So much so that when I was in a great relationship when I was 20 and I got pregnant, I was terrified, absolutely terrified of having kids, mainly because I didn't think I could do it. I was terrified of, you know, unmothering my own child in the way that I had been unmothered. I was only 20. I didn't have any psychological language or insight, you know, to try and work through what I was worrying about. But I was really scared. And also I was really scared that I would replicate my mother's and my grandmother's and goodness knows how far back my maternal line of women whose lives kind of came to an end because they had a kid when they were really young. You know, it's what I'd internalized growing up. You know, basically having children ruins your life is kind of the message I internalized in my family, from my teachers. You know, actually they were talking about teenage pregnancy, but they put the fear of God in us so much. It was like, just basically children ruin your life. And, you know, and don't sit on a warm chair if a boy's just been in it. Just and so it was, you know, when I met the man a few years later that I went on to marry at 26, I said to him, you know, I don't think I want to have kids. And he was like, okay. That was the big conversation. And at 29, having been part of his family for, you know, a few years, you know, quite a few years by then, and he was one of 6. It was a, you know, a big, loving English family, 2 parents who loved each other, 6 completely bizarre siblings, of which he was one. Just like I began to see that family could be something different to what I'd experienced. And I experienced a change of heart. And I said to him, actually, you know, I think I do want children. He was like, okay. So, you know, we started trying for a family, and unfortunately I was unable to conceive. I had an operation to check that there was no damage from the abortion. The gynecologist said it was the finest uterus he'd seen all week. You know, there was nothing wrong with either of us. I know, bless him. Yeah, these people really shouldn't talk to people when they're conscious sometimes. And I was unexplained infertility, never found out why, spent years trying, and just at the point when we got to the point where we were kind of nearly considering IVF, really the strain of it all just broke our marriage. So, you know, at 38, broke up from the person I thought I'd be with for the rest of my life after 16 years, and was kind of back out in the world of dating at 40, and convinced I could meet someone else and do IVF. But what happened to me in those years of trying to conceive is I became obsessed. I call it baby mania. I became absolutely obsessed with having a baby. And in some ways, that baby mania also masked the things that were going wrong in the marriage. Because I had this idea, pronatalism again, that somehow a baby was going to fix all that. You know, that once we had a child, he would stop partying, we would move out of the city, you know, that we would be different people, that we would have a different marriage. You know, it was, I feel a bit embarrassed saying it now, it seems really childish, but, you know, I bought into that. So then I'm like the grieving childless woman, and then I transitioned through my grief to come out the other side feeling at peace. So in some ways, I feel I've experienced so many parts of the journey, you know, being sure I didn't want to have children, being ambivalent, you know, being sure I didn't want to have a child when I was 20, being desperate for a child from 29 to 39, and then grieving that from sort of, you know, 42 to about 47, you know, really deeply grieving it. And I guess I'm perhaps unusually honest about that journey, which I think people find very helpful. I'd love to know what you make of that, the complexity of my childless, because I don't think it's a binary, childless, child-free. I think it's a spectrum, and I think we move around on that spectrum over the course of our life.
I think that's really, really, first of all, thank you for sharing all that, by the way. I learned some things I did not know. I agree that it's not always cut and dry. And, you know, for me, I didn't want to ever be a mom. I feel like for me, it's pretty like at 22, I realized I had a choice, because the choice conversation never really came up in my life. I knew
it doesn't, does it?
You know, yeah, like I had relatives that didn't have kids. I did not know why they had kids until later, until I had that conversation with them. So I assumed that I would have to have kids. But at 22, the light bulb went off of, oh, I actually don't have to. And therefore I made my decisions following through accordingly. And I just turned 39. So it's been, you know, the only thing that has shifted is like, I want to start talking about this. But questioning, I have not questioned. There's been no need. And someone asked me yesterday, did you wake up and suddenly your biological clock went off? Like, they were joking, but, you know, because at that age, it's, you know, women are starting to become moms for the first time at 39. So they were just curious, and people want to know. And I think that's the thing. We often hear even in the child-free community, is they're afraid that one day they're going to wake up and start feeling like they want to have a kid. So, you know, it is really, your journey is really fascinating in the sense that you've had those feelings too. Like it's not, because some people will always want to be a parent or a mother, or however they phrase it. Some won't ever want to have kids, will be staunchly child-free and never bat an eye about it. It'll never come up. But there will probably be a lot, and we really don't know, because if no one says anything, how do we know? But I imagine there will be a number that will go up and down. And I'm always fascinated with the time, like the amount of time that a person does want to have a child, because it's, to me, that's still temporary. Like everything is temporary. All of our feelings are temporary, really. If like listening to you, I go, it's, a decade does not feel temporary, but in the grand scheme of things, it kind of is, like, if you live long enough. And so, you know, I think like this conversation really isn't, I mean, sorry, my question isn't really from the childless perspective, but for someone who has chosen not to have kids, but is, for whatever reasons, now starting to kind of feel like, oh, maybe I do. What do you speak to waiting? Because I mean, I know your life is different, but there's still there's like a it's like a waiting game we have to play sometimes, because you may feel like, okay, I do really want to have a child, but then what if you change your mind after, you know, like after a few years?
Yes. I mean, being ambivalent about becoming a parent, and then becoming a parent and realizing you've made the wrong choice is not something people are very public about, but they are certainly anonymously, you know, we are hearing more and more about parenthood regret, because the actual experience of parenting is very tough.
But even waiting, like not having a kid, waiting it out to see if you still want it in 5 years, like that seems tough. But
I can imagine it is tough. But once again, we have pronatalism at play here, because the underlying message is that if you make the wrong choice, if it turns out that you do want children and you regret the choice you've made, you will never get over it.
Right.
Regret is an emotion. It can be worked through. You know, life is littered with paths not taken. And we can learn from that and help to understand ourselves, and we can still go forward and have a meaningful life. If it turns out that you have to grieve your losses, I have deeply grieved the children that live only in my heart. They are still with me. I know their names, and as I grow older, they grow older with me. You know, the children I would have had with my ex-husband would all be young adults now, you know. So it's possible to occupy both of those spaces. And once again, we're back to the binary. I think you can be happy that you've made the child-free choice, and carry some regret that you don't have kids, or that you didn't make a different decision. But I think it's this kind of almost judgment day, sort of, you will be in regret. Our emotions don't work like that. Something you said really struck me, LeNora, about the choice conversation. I gave a lecture, I don't know, a few years ago, it's probably about 2017. And 4 of my nieces were there, because although I don't have siblings, my ex-husband has many, so I have nieces and nephews through my ex-marriage. And I'm very close to these 4 sisters in one family. And the youngest was, I think she was probably about 19 at the time, and she was at this lecture. And it was really about the history of being childless and child-free, and it was quite a sort of a broad topic. And afterwards, she kind of came up to me and she said, "So you mean I don't have to have children?" And I went, "No, you can, it's a choice. Sometimes you can choose to have children, and actually it turns out that's not how, that's not how it happens in life, but you can also choose not to." And it was the first time she'd ever heard that it was possible to choose. She just thought you had to have children. And this is someone, she's actually coming to spend the holidays with me. We're very close. She's kind of 24, 25. And 2 of her elder sisters have had children, and another one is a bit kind of not sure. She's not partnered, and she's not that bothered about kids. But I thought that was extraordinary, that it's still so prevalent, that in quite a sort of, a broad-minded and thoughtful family, where they interact with loads and loads of people, including me, including the childless aunt, who actually I have to say I've been the groovy aunt, the glamorous aunt. because all of the other aunts are the mothers of their cousins, so they kind of have a sort of surrogate mum status, whereas these young women, when they were growing up around me, they've always seen I've been a role model to them in a different way, because they've been able to imagine themselves as an older version of themselves, and i.e. more like me. They couldn't really imagine themselves as a mum, because that seems sort of too different. At a certain point, that changed, but I've modeled for them, and I have been allowed to model for them. Their mum did not see me as a threat. Sometimes people don't like childless and child-free women being around their daughters in case they give them ideas. That's pronatalism again, keep the deviant woman away from my children. Yeah.
And it also influenced, like, my brother has 2 sons. One of them has just recently come out as non-binary, but like there's a place for glamorous childless and child-free aunts. Like, I am one of those people, and it's because it's good. Like, my brother's a child-free ally. Like, he was a teen dad, has his children full-time as a single parent, and he very much supports these conversations, and he wants his kids to know that you have options. You can have options in life.
I just want to circle back and comment on something, regarding the journey, as in how do you find out that you don't want to have children? Because my experience, and I've talked about this already in the podcast, is a lot different than LeNora's. I'm Latina. I come from a very conservative society, very Catholic, very traditional, you have to grow up and get married and then have children. That's like the, go to school, get married, have children. Yeah. And I always thought that was the thing that I was going to do, because that's the thing that everyone else does. And the first time I heard that child-free, that not being a mother, that motherhood was a choice, I was 33 years old. And I didn't know that. Like, somebody told me that, it's a choice. And to me, it was like a light bulb just went in my head. And I was like, I don't want this. This is not what I want. And the thing about pronatalism, what I find very, very damaging in regards to, how women have to become mothers is biologically, right? It's like you have to be a biological mother. And there's like being an adoptive mother, a foster mother, and any other way of mothering. It's not the same. Like, there's biological moms, and then there's the rest of the mothers. And I always tell my audience, because the thing about regret, what if I regret not having children? It comes up all the time. And to me, it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, am I still child-free? Yeah, I'm still child-free, right? So it's like it's a construction. It's not like it doesn't have to be an all end all, it doesn't have to be a thing that you decide today for the rest of your life. And if you want to become a mother down the line, there's so many other ways to do it other than biologically having a child. You can also mother other things other than people, I guess. And so there's this idea that the only way or valid way to be a mom is just having a kid. And I don't necessarily agree with that either.
Well, I do think mothering is a verb, not a noun, and there are many things in this world that need mothering. People, but also the non-human world, the planet around us, projects. There's so many things that need that nurturing attention for us to devote our lives to. It's just that we won't get the social kind of adulation for it. And something I think is a really big issue to think about also is how do we organize our aging and our vulnerable older years in a society where we share that, where the social care systems for elderly people are broken, and where the extended family networks are sort of massively weakened in terms of caring. I mean, growing up in my life, there have always been every family always had an elderly aunt who didn't have children. It was not unusual, obviously, before fertility treatments and before many things. Because of the baby boom years, there's this idea that everyone's always been having children, but actually The baby boom was called the baby boom for a reason. Everyone had kids suddenly. They didn't before, for lots of structural reasons, often not being partnered during those years or at all, as well as infertility. So, and those elderly childless women would give a lot of care within the family system. They would receive a lot of care within the family system in their later years if they needed it, if they wanted it. Those things have sort of broken down now to a great extent. You know, all of those women, when people, the British government's very fond of saying families must do more, and I shout at the radio because what it's really saying is women should do more. And those women that politicians talk about, those families that should be doing more, consist of women who are no longer available to do that work because they are doing other things with their lives. They are earning livings for themselves and their families, and they are engaged in other professional pursuits. So it's a conversation that's very hard to have with childless women because it brings up so much fear, because often women don't discover they're childless until much later in life. So the very next thought that comes up for childless women, and this was the same for me when I realized I definitely wouldn't be having children, was who's going to look after me when I'm old? And that thought came out of nowhere. And yet when I had been trying to have children, I had never thought about it. It had never been one of the reasons why I wanted to have kids. I need to have kids so there's someone there to take care of me when I'm old. Never entered my mind. But the moment I knew I wasn't having kids, I was like, oh my God, who's going to be there when I'm old? And I know that's the bingo that gets thrown smack bang in the face for every single time with child-free women. And my kind of question to you is, as you've had much longer to really think about the course of your life without children in it, does that translate into more nuanced conversations around how you will arrange your care when you're old and your plans? Because I think if that's the case, the childless community could learn so much from you.
Yes, that conversation. I mean, personally, conversation I've been in a part of have been around, like, what can you actually do in your area? We had a book club talking about solo aging, and that it was over the course of 6 weeks, and it really it unlocked a few things in my mind, because I have done estate planning. Like, I did it when I was 34, and I plan on living till I'm 95, and I plan on being independent, living alone, you know, by myself at 95. But, you know, in reality, that doesn't happen. You know, it's a very real thing, you know, planning for your care, what, you know, financially, but also it made me think, like, where do I want to live? I actually like the community I live in. The hospitals nearby. I live in Western Canada, by the way, so we have free healthcare too. You know, I mean, but even looking into what are my options if I live in this city, what kind of lifestyle do I want? Like, what kind of house would I want to live in? Who's my support network? You know, I mean, it has unlocked a lot of things. I did not realize I actually really like where I live, and I could see myself remaining here. I live in Calgary, so we have an international airport. We're close to Banff National Park. I mean, there's resources here. Not that everything is guaranteed to be around. I don't think the mountains are going anywhere. But as far as my old age care and who I could rely on, you know, you do think about that. So even just having the basic conversation when you're like in your 30s, without it being like so worrisome, but and also listening to other people who are 50, 60, 70 and what they do, you know, like that. Like, I don't, my dad's retired, and he doesn't have he has no expectation that his kids, meaning me and my brother, are going to take care of him. He's made his arrangements so we don't have to, because I am not a caregiver at all. Like, I don't have pets for a reason. So, you know, it's a combination of learning what you can do, what you feel comfortable doing, where you are. And quite honestly, a lot of people are scared, even at this age, to have to think about that, because it's a lot of unknowns, and it is. But just, you know, gathering other child-free people together, and let's say reading something like a book or having those discussions, I realized, I actually felt quite hopeful after the 6 weeks were done, because I had thought about it, but there was a lot of little things that I had not considered. And when I realized I actually can see myself aging well where I am, I don't necessarily mean in this particular townhouse, but in this area, I actually feel pretty good. You know, I mean, there's a lot of variables that can happen, but it's worth having the conversation, and it does happen.
That's the key, is having those conversations. And you can imagine if you don't realize, as I didn't, that I was definitely childless until I was 44, And then I was in a kind of grieving process for many years. And then, so let's say I'm 50 before I'm really, really engaging with the idea of that I'm going to be aging without children. It's a lot later. And certainly when I was part of AWOC, which is Aging Well Without Children in the UK, it was a kind of originally a campaigning group. It's now a charity. I used to sit on the board. One of the things that as a psychotherapist I found most fascinating is the absolute terror that most people have of even talking or thinking about the issue, that it brings up so many unknowns and so much fear that people would actually rather not think about it, which means, as you've discovered, until you actually engage with the topic, you can't discover that there are actually some quite creative solutions you could engage in. Yeah. If you imagine you leave that conversation till you're 65, there are a lot less options financially, logistically, and that's what's happening. People are putting that, you're one of the people who has a will. 50% of people in the UK, in the USA do not have a will. They are not planning on dying or aging.
It's a very real thing. Quickly segueing to something different. It's not really a segue, it's something completely different. Before we wrap up, there was a post that you did, you made on LinkedIn that caught my attention. It was from your book. You quoted chapter 8. The post, you said, "You don't have a body, you are a body." And then your caption said, "Forgiving our body is an act of grace that frees us up to start imagining that we have a future again, that we deserve a future again, because you don't have a body, you are a body." And I have a different philosophy. I have a body, but I'm not it. Now, just to give a little context, I am born a female, I identify as female, but I look at it as I'm a soul in a female body. I don't necessarily resonate with it. I don't look at as I am this body. I just have it. And there's more to me than just that. So for me, my first instinct reaction was okay, that goes against everything I believe about myself. So I just wanted, and I realized I'm coming from a child free by choice perspective. I recognize that you are, you offer a different point of view. So can you, I don't say clarify, but for someone like me who looks at this and goes, well, what do you I am not my body,
we are not actually that far apart. Later in that chapter, I say, I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience.
Right.
I think in that quote, it really speaks to the disconnect that a lot of childless women feel from their female body, as in they feel their body has betrayed them and let them down by not doing the one thing that a female body is meant to do. There can be a great deal of, a lot of the anger of grief can actually be directed against our own bodies, and we can separate ourselves from our bodies and see it as an it. We can kind of depersonalize ourselves in an unhelpful way, not in a spiritual way, but in an unhelpful way. And I think I am a body. I also think there is a spiritual part of me that is something different to the body that is animating this flesh. But I think making peace with that, we go back to Descartes, thinking that the mind and the body are separate. I found healing that divide within myself and making peace of being a female body has been a really important part of my healing from childlessness, and also healing a lot of the body hatred and misogyny that is inherent in our culture. I think I've come to a place of peace, and now that I'm aging in a female body, I'm also confronting, pronatalism, ageism, sexism, all of them together, and it feels that to make peace with our body for whatever reason, mine was childlessness, is actually a very radical act, because it frees up so much of our energy to do other shit with our thoughts and our lives than worrying about how we look.
I love ending this right there. Yeah. Jody, thank you so much for being here. We have to end this now. We seriously just thanks for being here. This was incredibly educational, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer so many questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel, LeNora, Kristen. It's been an honor, actually, to be invited to be on your show. I've learned a lot too, and I'm really grateful to you for the work you're doing in the world, and to all my child-free brothers and sisters and non-binary people out there.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here.
If you'd like to send us an email with any questions, comments, anything that crosses your mind, our email address is childfreegirls@gmail.com. We promise we read all of the emails. It might take a little bit for us to answer, but we do read them all. Also, you can find us at www.childfreegirls.com. That's our website. If you want to visit, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe.
Do people still use www?
I don't know.
I know.
And I'm going to say you can find me gateway-women.com, on Instagram at Gateway Women, also at Twitter on Gateway Women.
Yes, and we will have all the links to Jody's work, including her book, in the captions below on the YouTube channel and on the podcast. Of course, you can find us all over social media. We are at Childfree Girls on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you can find us on Clubhouse, the app. Search Childfree Club. You'll find us there. We host rooms 7 days a week, and you can also find us on Amazon. Our book, Childfree Girls, Comfort Food for Thought. Thank you, everybody. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even if you are listening on the podcast, head over to YouTube. Thank you.
Today's question is, since we have all established that there is not a cut and dry child-free or even childless experience, we would like to know where you are on the spectrum of life involving having or not having children, probably leaning toward not having, since this has been a childless and child-free conversation. You can send us your answer to childfreegirls@gmail.com, or you can leave it below in the comments, whatever you want, but let us know.
That's a fascinating question. I really look forward to seeing those answers.
Oh, me too.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. No, you say bye.
No, you say bye.
Oh my God, I'm leaving.
You leave first.
I'm going.
Bye.
Bye.